Subscribe to Storylab for more stories. Now, let's begin this one. Chapter 1. The Call That Changed Everything. The Syrian desert wind carried the scent of cordite and diesel fuel as Garrett Burns watched his latest batch of recruits practice room clearing techniques. 20 years of military service, followed by 5 years as a private contractor, had taught him that precision saved lives. The rebels moved with purpose now, their movements crisp and calculated, a far cry from the desperate farmers and shopkeepers he'd met 6 weeks ago. "Alpha Team, your entry was 3 seconds too slow," Garrett called out, his weathered hands adjusting the tactical vest that bore the scars of a dozen conflicts. At 45, he still moved with the fluid grace of a man half his age, his steel-gray eyes missing nothing as they tracked his students' progress. His satellite phone buzzed. The only people who had this number were his wife Susan back in Phoenix, his employer, and a select few former students he'd trained over the years. The caller ID showed Mitch McClure, one of his first protégés from Afghanistan, now a detective with Phoenix PD. "Mitch, this better be good. I'm in the middle of—" "Garrett." The tremor in Mitch's voice cut through the desert noise like a blade. "It's about Devin." The world seemed to narrow to a single point. Devin, his 18-year-old son, studying engineering at Arizona State, who'd never hurt a fly in his life. Garrett's grip tightened on the phone until his knuckles went white. What happened? A gang leader named Antonio Gallagher put him in the ICU, beaten within an inch of his life outside a coffee shop near campus. The kid was just wrong place, wrong time. Looked at Gallagher's girl the wrong way, apparently. Garrett's vision blurred red at the edges. Where are the arrests? A long pause. "That's the problem, Garrett. Gallagher runs the Serpent Syndicate. They've got half the precinct on their payroll and the other half too scared to move. Internal affairs is compromised, and the feds won't touch a local gang case without ironclad evidence we can't get." The phone creaked in Garrett's grip. Around him, the Syrian rebels had stopped their exercise, sensing the change in their instructor's demeanor. "How bad is Devin?" "Broken ribs, punctured lung, severe concussion. Susan's been at the hospital for 3 days straight. She asked me not to call you. Said you'd do something that would get yourself killed." Garrett closed his eyes, seeing his son's face the last time they'd spoken via video call. Bright, optimistic, talking about his girlfriend Clara and his upcoming finals. Now that same face was lying broken in a hospital bed. "Mitch," Garrett's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried more menace than any shout. "You trained under me for 8 months in Kandahar. You know what I'm capable of. That's exactly why I'm calling. The cops are too scared to touch Gallagher. His organization has tentacles everywhere. Drugs, weapons, human trafficking. But you—" Mitch paused. "You're the only one who can end this." Garrett looked out at the vast Syrian landscape, then at his students who were now watching him with growing concern. These rebels would have to finish their training without him. Some wars were more important than others. "I'll be on the next plane out." "Garrett, listen to me. This isn't some terror cell in a cave. This is Phoenix. There are laws, procedures." "Mitch." The name came out like a gunshot. "When I land, Antonio Gallagher and his organization won't see the next sunset. That's not a threat. It's a promise." He ended the call and turned to his second-in-command, a grizzled former Syrian army colonel named Hassan. "I have to go," Garrett said in Arabic. "Family emergency." Hassan nodded gravely. "The training. Continue without me. You know the protocols." Garrett's mind was already shifting gears, cataloging resources, calculating travel time, planning contingencies. "If anyone asks, I was never here." Within an hour, Garrett had packed a single tactical bag with carefully selected tools. Items that would pass cursory airport security, but could be assembled into something far more dangerous. His passport, clean of any Syrian stamps thanks to his employer's connections, would get him to Germany, then Phoenix. As the cargo plane lifted off from the desert airstrip, Garrett stared down at the endless sand below. He'd spent years teaching others how to fight asymmetric warfare, how a smaller, smarter force could dismantle a larger, more established enemy. Antonio Gallagher was about to learn those lessons firsthand. Chapter 2. The Homecoming. Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport buzzed with its usual chaos, but Garrett moved through it like a ghost, his trained eyes automatically cataloging exits, security positions, and potential threats. 26 hours of travel had done nothing to dim the cold fury burning in his chest. Susan was waiting for him outside baggage claim, and the sight of her nearly broke his composure. His wife of 22 years looked like she'd aged a decade in the past week. Her auburn hair was disheveled, her usually bright green eyes red-rimmed from crying and exhaustion. "Garrett," she whispered, falling into his arms. He held her tight, feeling her body shake with suppressed sobs. Over her shoulder, he spotted Mitch McClure approaching, still the same lanky frame and sharp features. Those stress lines had appeared around his eyes since their last meeting. "How is he?" Garrett asked without preamble as they walked to Mitch's unmarked Crown Vic. "Stable," Susan said, her voice hollow. "The doctors say he'll make a full recovery, but it's going to take months. And the psychological trauma." She trailed off, unable to finish. Mitch navigated through Phoenix traffic while briefing Garrett on the situation. "Gallagher's been untouchable for 3 years. The Serpent Syndicate controls drug distribution from Tempe to Scottsdale. They've got judges, cops, even some city council members in their pocket. What about federal intervention? The FBI has been trying to build a RICO case, but every time they get close, witnesses disappear or evidence goes missing. Last federal agent who tried to infiltrate got his cover blown and ended up in the desert with a bullet in his head." Garrett's jaw tightened. "Tell me about Gallagher." Antonio Gallagher, 34, born and raised in South Phoenix. Did 2 stretches in state prison for aggravated assault and weapons charges. Smart, ruthless, and paranoid as hell. Lives in a compound in Paradise Valley, 12-foot walls, armed security, the works. Family. Mitch glanced in the rearview mirror. Divorced. Ex-wife Jenny Perez lives in California with their daughter. Gallagher sees the kid maybe twice a year. His operation is his only real priority. They arrived at Phoenix General Hospital as the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and red that reminded Garrett uncomfortably of muzzle flashes. The ICU was a sterile maze of beeping machines and hushed conversations. Devin lay unconscious in bed 7, his face so swollen and bruised that Garrett barely recognized his son. Tubes and wires connected him to various monitors, each beep a reminder of how close they'd come to losing him forever. Susan took Garrett's hand as they stood beside the bed. "The doctors say he might not remember the attack clearly. Traumatic brain injuries can cause. I remember everything." Devin's voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through the room like thunder. His eyes, the same steel gray as his father's, opened slowly, focusing with difficulty. "Dad, you came back." Garrett leaned down, gently touching his son's uninjured hand. "Of course I came back. How are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck." Devin tried to smile, but winced at the pain. "I remember the guy who did this. Antonio Gallagher. He was with this girl, Maxine McIntosh, at the coffee shop. I wasn't even looking at her. I was reading a text from Clara. But he thought." "Save your strength," Garrett said softly. "Just focus on getting better." But Devin's eyes had taken on a fever brightness. "Dad," he said something while he was beating me. Said I was lucky he was feeling generous, because usually he doesn't leave witnesses. Then he laughed and said the cops wouldn't do anything anyway because they all work for him. Susan gasped, but Garrett's expression didn't change. He simply nodded and squeezed his son's hand. "Get some rest. Everything's going to be okay now." Later, in the hospital parking garage, Garrett turned to Mitch. "I need everything you have on Gallagher's operation. Locations, personnel, financial records, everything." "Garrett, you can't just..." "Mitch." Garrett's voice carried the authority of a man who'd commanded soldiers in some of the world's most dangerous places. "You called me because the system failed. Because good cops like you are outnumbered and outgunned. Because someone needs to do what you can't." Mitch stared at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "My car. 1 hour. I'll bring what I can." As Mitch drove away, Susan gripped Garrett's arm. "What are you planning?" Garrett looked back at the hospital, then at his wife. In the fluorescent lighting of the parking garage, His face looked carved from stone. Justice. Chapter 3. Reconnaissance. The safe house Mitch had arranged was a modest ranch home in Ahwatukee, far enough from Gallagher's territory to avoid casual surveillance. Garrett had spent the morning transforming the spare bedroom into a tactical operations center, complete with maps, photographs, and a whiteboard covered in his precise handwriting. Susan brought him coffee as he studied surveillance photos of Gallagher's compound. She'd been quiet since their hospital visit, processing the reality of what her husband was planning. "You don't have to do this," she said finally. Garrett looked up from the photos. "Yes, I do. If I don't, Gallagher will hurt someone else's son, someone else's family, and the system will fail them just like it failed us." A knock at the door interrupted them. Mitch entered carrying a cardboard box and wearing the expression of a man who'd crossed a line he couldn't uncross. "Everything I could gather without raising suspicions," he said, setting the box on the dining table. Financial records, surveillance photos, informant reports, and a complete org chart. Garrett emptied the box methodically, his trained mind absorbing and categorizing information with frightening efficiency. The Serpent Syndicate was more sophisticated than he'd expected, a multi-million-dollar operation with legitimate business fronts and carefully compartmentalized cells. "What's this?" He held up a photograph of a warehouse complex in South Phoenix. "Their primary distribution center," Mitch explained. "They move about 50 kilos of heroin and cocaine through there every month, plus weapons and stolen goods. It's their crown jewel." Garrett studied the layout. Security? Armed guards, surveillance cameras, motion sensors. Plus, it's in the middle of their territory. Backup could arrive in minutes. Good. Garrett made a note on his pad. Predictable security is vulnerable security. Susan frowned. "Garrett, you're talking like you're going to war." "I am." He turned to face her fully. "Honey, these people understand only one language, force. Gallagher beat our son nearly to death because he thought he could get away with it. He was right. Under normal circumstances." Mitch pulled out a folder marked confidential. "There's something else. We think Gallagher is planning something big." The FBI intercepted some communications suggesting a major shipment coming in next week. Could be drugs, could be weapons. Or both, Garrett mused, studying the intercept reports. "What's the timeline?" "Tuesday night. 3 days from now." Garrett's eyes lit up with a predatory gleam. Perfect timing. Over the next several hours, he grilled Mitch for every detail about Gallagher's operation. The gang leader maintained a strict routine. Breakfast at his compound, afternoon meetings at various legitimate businesses he owned, evenings at an upscale nightclub called Serpent's Den that served as his unofficial headquarters. "He's got a weakness for expensive cars," Mitch added. "Owns a garage full of custom vehicles. Also has a thing for high-stakes poker games." Who does he trust? His lieutenant, Warren Bautista, handles day-to-day operations. Then there's his bodyguard, Ray Riddle, former military, dishonorably discharged for excessive force. Those two are always with him. Garrett made notes, building psychological profiles of his targets. By evening, he had a complete picture of the Serpent Syndicate structure, capabilities, and vulnerabilities. "There's one more thing," Mitch said reluctantly. "Gallagher knows you're in town." The room went dead silent. Susan's coffee cup rattled against its saucer. "Ow!" Airport security footage. "He's got contacts everywhere, including some TSA agents. Word is he's curious about you. Ran your name through some databases and found out about your military background." Garrett smiled, and the expression was utterly without warmth. "Good. Let him be curious. Garrett, if he knows you're here, then he'll make mistakes. Paranoid men always do." He turned to the whiteboard and began sketching a timeline. "Gallagher thinks he's dealing with a grieving father who might cause some trouble. He has no idea what's really coming for him." Susan studied her husband's face. The cold calculation, the predatory focus she'd seen glimpses of during his military years, but never this intense. "What are you going to do?" Garrett capped his marker and turned to face them both. "I'm going to dismantle his organization piece by piece. I'm going to take everything he values, his money, his power, his reputation, his people. And then, when he's completely isolated and helpless, I'm going to make him pay for what he did to our son. That could take weeks, Mitch protested. No, Garrett said quietly. It's going to take 3 days. By Thursday morning, Antonio Gallagher will be finished. Outside, thunder rumbled across the Phoenix sky as the first storm of the season approached. In the safe house, Garrett Burns began planning a war. Chapter 4. The Hunter Becomes Hunted. Garrett spent Tuesday morning conducting surveillance from a rented sedan, cataloging the movements around Gallagher's legitimate businesses. The gang leader owned a chain of auto repair shops, a construction company, and 2 restaurants, all serving as front for money laundering. At 10:47 a.m., his patience was rewarded. A black Escalade pulled up to Premier Auto Works, one of Gallagher's shops, and outstepped the man himself. Antonio Gallagher was smaller than Garrett had expected. Maybe 5'8", compact build, but he carried himself with the arrogant swagger of someone accustomed to having others step aside. His expensive suit couldn't quite hide the bulge of a shoulder holster, and his dark eyes constantly scanned his surroundings. Warren Bautista emerged from the passenger seat, followed by Ray Riddle from the driver's side. Bautista was thin and nervous, constantly checking his phone. Riddle was built like a brick wall, his buzz-cut head swiveling as he assessed potential threats. Garrett noted their positions, their body language, their routine. These men had been operating without serious opposition for so long they'd grown complacent. That would be their downfall. His phone buzzed. Text message from an unknown number. Heard you're looking for me. Let's meet tonight. Serpent's Den, 10 p.m. Come alone or don't come at all. AG. Garrett smiled grimly. Gallagher was making his first mistake, trying to control the situation by choosing the meeting place. What he didn't understand was that Garrett had already been inside the nightclub twice over the past 2 days, posing as a businessman looking to buy drinks for potential clients. He texted back, "I'll be there." Serpent's Den occupied the top floor of a converted warehouse in Scottsdale, accessible only by a private elevator. The club's decor leaned heavily into its reptilian theme. Dark green lighting, serpentine sculptures, and bartenders dressed in scale vests. Garrett arrived at exactly 10 p.m., dressed in an expensive suit and carrying himself with the relaxed confidence of a man attending a business meeting. The bouncer, a mountain named Joshua Cotton, looked him over with professional interest. "You're Burns," Cotton said. It wasn't a question. "I am. Boss is waiting in the VIP section, straight back up the stairs." The club was crowded with Phoenix's affluent nightlife crowd. Young professionals, minor celebrities, and the kind of people who didn't ask too many questions about their host's business interests. Garrett moved through the crowd, noting exit points and security positions. The VIP section was a raised platform overlooking the main floor, separated by tinted glass and guarded by 2 more armed men. Antonio Gallagher sat at a circular booth with Warren Bautista on his left and Ray Riddle positioned where he could watch both the entrance and the crowd below. "Mr. Burns," Gallagher stood as Garrett approached, extending a hand with theatrical warmth. "Please sit. Can I get you a drink?" Garrett shook the offered hand, noting the calluses that suggested Gallagher wasn't afraid to get his own hands dirty. "Whiskey. Neat." Gallagher gestured to a waitress, who quickly brought the drink. The gang leader studied Garrett with open curiosity. "You know, I've heard some interesting things about you. Military background, overseas contractor work. Very impressive resume. I do what needs to be done." "Yes, I imagine you do." Gallagher leaned back, his tone conversational. "Your son is recovering well, I hear. Modern medicine is remarkable." The implied threat hung in the air like smoke. Garrett sipped his whiskey and met Gallagher's gaze steadily. "It is, though some injuries take longer to heal than others." Gallagher laughed, a sound devoid of genuine humor. "You know, Mr. Burns, I think we may have gotten off on the wrong foot. Your boy, that was an unfortunate misunderstanding. Maybe we can work something out." "What kind of something?" "Well, a man with your skills could be very useful in my organization. There are always opportunities for someone who understands violence and how to apply it properly." Bautista shifted nervously, but Riddle remained stone-faced. Around them, the club's music pounded with hypnotic rhythm. "You want to offer me a job?" Garrett said flatly. "Think of it as a partnership. I could use someone with your expertise, and you... Well, you strike me as a man who appreciates financial security. Garrett set down his glass and smiled. It was the same expression a shark might wear before attacking. You know what, Antonio? You're absolutely right. I do appreciate security. In fact, I've made it my business to ensure my family's security. Something in his tone made Riddle tense, his hand drifting toward his jacket. And how exactly do you do that? Gallagher asked. By eliminating threats. Garrett's voice remained conversational, but his eyes had gone cold as Arctic ice. Permanently. The temperature in the VIP section seemed to drop 10 degrees. Gallagher's smile faltered slightly. Mr. Burns, I think you may be misunderstanding the situation here. This is my city, my territory, my rules. Garrett stood slowly, buttoning his jacket. No, Antonio, I think you're the one who's misunderstood. You see, you made a critical error when you hurt my son. And what error was that? You assumed I was just another grieving father who would accept the system's failure and move on with his life. Garrett's smile widened. But I'm not just another father. I'm the man who taught Army Rangers how to hunt down enemies in urban environments. I'm the guy who showed Kurdish fighters how to dismantle ISIS cells with nothing but patience and precision. Gallagher's face had gone pale beneath his tan. And starting tomorrow, Garrett continued, I'm going to teach you and your organization what it feels like to be hunted. He walked away without another word, leaving Gallagher and his men sitting in stunned silence. Behind him, he could hear urgent whispered conversations starting up. As he descended in the elevator, Garrett checked his watch. Phase 1 was complete. Gallagher now knew exactly who he was dealing with, and that knowledge would make him paranoid, suspicious, and prone to mistakes. Outside, the storm that had been building all week finally broke, sending sheets of rain across the Phoenix night. Garrett pulled up his collar and walked into the darkness, already planning his next move. The war had officially begun. Chapter 5, Pressure Points. Wednesday morning brought clear skies and a citywide alert that would change everything. Garrett was reviewing building schematics in the safe house when Mitch burst through the door, his face flushed with excitement and fear. You need to see this, Mitch said, turning on the television. The local news was running a breaking story. Federal agents raided 3 locations connected to the Serpent Syndicate early this morning, seizing an estimated $2 million in cash and narcotics. Acting on an anonymous tip, the DEA and FBI coordinated the simultaneous raids. Garrett watched with satisfaction as footage showed agents hauling evidence out of one of Gallagher's auto shops. Susan joined them, coffee mug in hand. Did you? She began. Anonymous tip, Garrett confirmed. I may have mentioned to a certain DEA contact that Gallagher would be moving his Tuesday shipment to secondary locations after our meeting last night. Mitch stared at him. How did you know he'd move the drugs? Because paranoid men do predictable things when they feel threatened. I told him I was coming for his organization, so naturally he'd relocate his most valuable assets. Garrett pointed at the screen, right into federal hands. The news anchor continued. The raids have netted the largest drug seizure in Phoenix PD history. Sources close to the investigation suggest this is only the beginning of a major federal operation against organized crime in the valley. Garrett's phone rang. Unknown number. You son of a bitch. Gallagher's voice was tight with rage. What did you do? I told you I was coming for your organization. Did you think I was bluffing? This isn't over, Burns. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. No, Antonio. The biggest mistake of my life was trusting the system to protect my family. Everything since then has been a correction. The line went dead. Garrett looked at Mitch and Susan, both of whom were staring at him with a mixture of admiration and concern. $2 million in losses overnight, Garrett said, making a note on his timeline. That's going to create cash flow problems, which means Gallagher will have to liquidate other assets to maintain operations. How do you know so much about criminal organizations? Susan asked. Because crime syndicates operate like insurgent cells, distributed networks with multiple revenue streams, and careful compartmentalization. The principles for dismantling them are the same whether you're in Afghanistan or Arizona. Mitch pulled out his own phone. I'm getting reports from patrol units. 3 of Gallagher's lieutenants were arrested trying to move cash from other locations. Word is spreading that someone's targeting the syndicate. Good. Fear and uncertainty will make them sloppy. Garrett turned to the whiteboard where he'd mapped out Gallagher's remaining assets. What's his most profitable legitimate business? Probably Gallagher Construction. They've got contracts with the city worth millions. Garrett circled the construction company's name on his board. Not anymore. That afternoon, Garrett sat in the office of Virginia Winter, an investigative reporter for the Arizona Republic who'd been trying to expose municipal corruption for years. Her cramped cubicle was covered with newspaper clippings, photographs, and sticky notes. The workspace of someone obsessed with finding the truth. "Mr. Burns," she said, leaning back in her chair, "when you called this morning, you said you had information about city contracts and kickbacks. I have to ask, what's your connection to this story?" Garrett had prepared for this question. "I'm a concerned citizen whose family was victimized by the failure of our justice system. I believe the public has a right to know why criminals like Antonio Gallagher operate with impunity." Virginia studied him with sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. She was younger than he'd expected, maybe early 30s, but carried herself with the confidence of someone who'd broken major stories before. "And you just happened to come across evidence of municipal corruption?" "I have a background in financial analysis," Garrett lied smoothly. "When I started looking into Gallagher's operation, certain patterns became obvious." He slid a manila folder across her desk. Inside were copies of contracts, financial records, and correspondence he'd obtained through Mitch's contacts, all carefully selected to show a clear pattern of bid rigging and kickbacks involving Gallagher Construction and 3 city council members. Virginia's eyes widened as she reviewed the documents. Where did you get this? Let's just say that sometimes evidence finds its way to people who know what to do with it." She looked up at him sharply. "Are you suggesting someone inside city government is leaking this information?" "I'm suggesting that not everyone in public service is corrupt. Some people still believe in doing the right thing." Virginia spent 20 minutes reviewing the documents, asking pointed questions about dates, amounts, and procedures. Garrett answered what he could and deflected what he couldn't, maintaining his cover as a concerned citizen with analytical skills. "If this information is accurate," she said finally, "it could bring down Gallagher's construction business and implicate several elected officials. That would be a public service." She fixed him with a penetrating stare. "Mr. Burns, I've been an investigative reporter for 8 years. In my experience, concerned citizens don't usually have access to this level of detailed financial information. They also don't typically understand complex money laundering schemes well enough to track them through multiple shell companies." Garrett met her gaze steadily. "Perhaps you've never met a concerned citizen whose son was nearly beaten to death by a gang leader with political connections." Something in his voice made her expression soften slightly. "I'm sorry about your son. How is he?" "Recovering. Slowly." Virginia nodded, then gathered the documents. "I'll need to verify this information independently, but if it checks out, I can have a story ready for tomorrow's edition." "That would be appreciated." As Garrett prepared to leave, Virginia called after him. "Mr. Burns? Be careful. If Gallagher realizes you're behind these revelations, he's going to come after you with everything he has." Garrett paused at the door and looked back at her. "I'm counting on it." By evening, the story was already breaking online. City contract scandal. Corruption investigation targets construction company with alleged gang ties. Virginia had worked fast, confirming enough details to run with the story and promising more revelations to come. Garrett watched the news coverage from the safe house, noting how quickly other media outlets picked up the story. By morning, Gallagher Construction would be suspended from all city contracts pending investigation. His phone buzzed with another text from Gallagher. "You're a dead man." Garrett texted back, "Get in line." Phase 2 was complete. In less than 24 hours, he'd cost Gallagher millions in assets and destroyed his most profitable legitimate business. But the real war was just beginning. Chapter 6, The Trap. Thursday morning brought news that exceeded even Garrett's expectations. By 6 a.m., 3 major construction clients had terminated their contracts with Gallagher Construction, citing reputational concerns. The FBI had seized the company's bank accounts as part of their ongoing investigation. Most significantly, Warren Bautista had been arrested at Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport, attempting to board a flight to Mexico with $500,000 in cash. Gallagher's hemorrhaging money and people. Mitch reported over coffee at the safe house. My sources say he's called in favors from other crime families, trying to find out who's targeting him. Garrett studied the updated intelligence reports spread across the dining table. What about his inner circle? That's where it gets interesting. Ray Riddle is still loyal, but some of the mid-level guys are getting nervous. Word is that Manuel Gorman, who runs their weapons operation, approached a federal prosecutor about a possible deal. Susan looked up from her newspaper. The Arizona Republic's front page featured Virginia Winter's follow-up story about municipal corruption. How long before this all comes back to you? It won't, Garrett assured her. I've been careful to maintain plausible deniability. As far as anyone knows, I'm just a concerned father asking uncomfortable questions. His phone rang. Unknown number again. We need to talk. Gallagher's voice was tight with barely controlled fury. Face to face. I'm listening. Steel Indian School Park. 1 hour. Come alone. No, Garrett said firmly. I choose the location. Papago Park, near the Desert Botanical Garden. 2 hours. Why should I agree to your terms? Because you need something from me more than I need something from you. A long pause. Fine. 2 hours. Garrett ended the call and immediately started planning. Papago Park offered multiple escape routes, open sight lines, and enough civilian foot traffic to discourage an all-out assault. Most importantly, it was a location where he could control the tactical situation. You're not seriously going to meet him, Susan said. Yes, I am, but not the way he expects. Papago Park at noon was busy with joggers, families, and tourists exploring the iconic Red Rock formations. Garrett arrived an hour early, positioning himself on higher ground with a clear view of the meeting spot, a picnic area near the park's main trail. At exactly 2 p.m., a black SUV pulled into the parking area. Gallagher emerged with Ray Riddle and 2 other men Garrett didn't recognize. They spread out in a loose formation, clearly expecting trouble. Garrett called Gallagher's phone. I'm here, the gang leader answered. Where are you? Look up and to your left. Red Rocks, about 50 yards above you. Gallagher scanned the area until he spotted Garrett sitting casually on a boulder, phone to his ear. Come down here so we can talk. No, you come up here. Alone. That's not happening. Then we have nothing to discuss. Garrett stood as if preparing to leave. Wait. Gallagher's desperation was audible. All right, I'm coming up. It took Gallagher 5 minutes to climb the rocky path, and he was slightly out of breath when he reached Garrett's position. The gang leader's expensive suit was ill-suited for desert hiking, and sweat stained his shirt despite the mild temperature. You've cost me $8 million in 3 days, Gallagher said without preamble. And you put my son in the hospital. I'd say we're just getting started. Gallagher studied Garrett's face, looking for some hint of what he was thinking. What do you want? Money? A cut of my operation? Name your price. I want you to understand something, Antonio. This isn't about money or territory or respect. This is about consequences. Consequences for what? For thinking you could hurt an innocent kid and walk away because the system is broken. Garrett's voice remained calm, but his eyes burned with cold fire. For believing that corruption and fear make you untouchable. Gallagher pulled out a handgun, holding it low but visible. Maybe I should just solve this problem right here. Go ahead, Garrett said calmly. Pull that trigger in a public park in broad daylight, with your men positioned where they can be identified by dozens of witnesses. See how untouchable you are when every cop in the state is hunting you for murdering a federal contractor's father. The lie about federal employment was a calculated risk, but Garrett could see it land. Gallagher's hand trembled slightly as he processed the implications. You're bluffing. Am I? Want to test that theory. For a long moment, they stared at each other. Finally, Gallagher lowered the gun. What do you want? He asked again. I want you to remember this conversation tomorrow night, when everything you've built comes crashing down. Garrett turned and began walking down a different path. Oh, and Antonio, you might want to check on your warehouse in South Phoenix. I think you'll find it very illuminating. As Garrett disappeared among the Red Rocks, Gallagher frantically called his operations center. The call went straight to voicemail. He tried Warren Bautista's phone, forgetting his lieutenant was in federal custody. Then Ray Riddle's radio crackled to life from the parking area below. "Boss, we've got a problem. The warehouse is on fire. Fire department's on scene, but..." The voice faded in static. Gallagher closed his eyes, understanding for the first time that he wasn't dealing with a grieving father seeking simple revenge. He was facing a professional who understood exactly how to dismantle an organization from the inside out. And he was losing. By evening, news reports confirmed that the Serpent Syndicate's primary distribution center had been destroyed in what investigators called a suspicious blaze with evidence of accelerant use. The warehouse fire had consumed millions of dollars in inventory and destroyed computer records spanning 3 years of operations. More importantly, the fire had drawn federal attention to the property, leading to the discovery of hidden compartments, sophisticated surveillance equipment, and evidence of the organization's true scope. As Garrett watched the coverage from his safe house, he allowed himself a small smile. 3 days of systematic pressure had reduced Gallagher from a confident crime boss to a desperate man making increasingly irrational decisions. Now it was time for the final phase. Chapter 7. The Reckoning begins. Friday evening found Antonio Gallagher holed up in his Paradise Valley compound, surrounded by the last of his loyal soldiers. The past week had destroyed 3/4 of his organization, wiped out his legitimate businesses, and left him facing federal charges that could put him away for life. But it was the psychological warfare that truly broke him. Every morning brought fresh disasters, seized assets, arrested lieutenants, broken supply chains. Someone was systematically dismantling everything he'd built, and that someone was always one step ahead. "Boss." Ray Riddle entered the study where Gallagher sat staring at financial reports. "We've got movement outside the gates. Looks like surveillance." Gallagher didn't look up. "Federal?" "Don't think so. Civilian vehicles, but they're being too careful. Professional careful." For the first time in hours, Gallagher showed interest. "Burns?" "Maybe. You want me to take a team and check it out?" "No." Gallagher stood, decision crystallizing in his mind. He wants to finish this face to face? Fine. Let's give him what he wants. 2 miles away, Garrett sat in a rented Honda Civic, watching Gallagher's compound through night vision binoculars. He'd spent the afternoon positioning assets around the perimeter, not to assault the compound, but to monitor escape routes and communicate with law enforcement when the time came. His phone buzzed with a text from Mitch. "Federal task force is ready to move. Just waiting for your signal." Garrett had spent the week carefully documenting Gallagher's criminal activities and providing that evidence to federal authorities through carefully orchestrated discoveries. The FBI now had enough evidence to dismantle the entire Serpent Syndicate, but they needed Gallagher himself for the coup de grace. Another text, this one from an unknown number. "Let's end this. Midnight. Come to the compound alone, and I'll surrender myself to federal authorities. Continue this war, and I'll make sure your son never feels safe again." Garrett studied the message, recognizing both the desperation and the continued threat. Gallagher was cornered, which made him more dangerous than ever. He texted back, "I'll be there." Then he called Mitch. "It's time. Have the task force in position, but not visible. When Gallagher and I meet, he's going to make one final mistake." "What if this is a trap?" "It is a trap," Garrett confirmed, "but not the kind he thinks." At 11:45 p.m., the gates of Gallagher's compound swung open. Garrett drove slowly up the circular driveway, noting the positions of armed guards and security cameras. The mansion itself was a monument to criminal success. Spanish colonial architecture, manicured landscaping, and the kind of ostentatious wealth that screamed for federal attention. Gallagher waited on the front steps, flanked by Ray Riddle and 2 other men. As Garrett emerged from the Honda, he noted that all 4 were armed and tense. "Mr. Burns," Gallagher called out, "I have to admit, you've impressed me. Most people don't have the skill or the patience to wage this kind of campaign." Garrett approached with his hands visible but relaxed. "Most people don't have a son in the hospital." "Yes, about that. I've been thinking about our situation, and I believe I have a solution that benefits everyone." They stood 15 feet apart now, close enough to talk without shouting, but far enough to react if violence erupted. "I'm listening." Gallagher smiled, but didn't reach his eyes. "You've cost me my organization, my money, my future. But you've also shown me something important, that I underestimated you from the beginning. Is there a point to this?" "The point is that I'm done playing games." Gallagher's voice hardened. "You want me to pay for what happened to your son? Fine, but I'm taking you with me." Ray Riddle stepped forward, pulling out a pistol. "Sorry, Burns. Nothing personal." "No," Garrett said calmly. "It's very personal." At that moment, several things happened simultaneously. Bright spotlights erupted from multiple positions around the compound's perimeter. Federal agents emerged from concealment positions Garrett had helped them establish earlier that evening. And most importantly, a voice boomed across the compound through megaphones. "This is the FBI. You are surrounded. Drop your weapons and get on the ground." Gallagher spun around in shock and fury. "You son of a bitch. This was all a setup." "No," Garrett corrected, pulling out his own weapon. A service pistol he'd legally purchased that afternoon. "This was justice." Ray Riddle swung his gun toward Garrett, but years of combat training proved decisive. Garrett's first shot took Riddle's center mass, dropping him instantly. His second shot shattered Gallagher's right shoulder, spinning the gang leader around and sending his weapon flying. The compound erupted in chaos as federal agents swarmed the property. The remaining guards, faced with overwhelming force and nowhere to run, threw down their weapons and surrendered. Gallagher lay on the ground, clutching his wounded shoulder and staring up at Garrett with a mixture of pain and disbelief. "Ow," he gasped. Garrett knelt beside him, ensuring the wound wasn't life-threatening before federal medics arrived. "You made the same mistake every criminal makes, Antonio. You thought this was about revenge. Wasn't it? No, it was about justice. Everything I've done over the past week was legal, documented, and designed to give federal authorities exactly what they needed to shut you down permanently." Gallagher's eyes widened as understanding dawned. "The raids, the arrests, the evidence, you orchestrated all of it. I provided information to appropriate authorities through proper channels. I documented criminal activities and reported them to law enforcement. And when you threatened my family tonight, I defended myself within the bounds of the law." Federal agents surrounded them now, medics tending to Gallagher's wound while others secured the scene. Agent Lewis Pugh, the task force commander, approached Garrett. "Mr. Burns, we'll need a full statement about tonight's events." "Of course. I assume you found everything you needed in the compound." Pugh smiled grimly. "Oh yes. Financial records, weapons cache, drug processing equipment, and enough evidence to put Gallagher away for 3 consecutive life sentences. Plus about a dozen other arrests we'll be making over the next few hours." As paramedics loaded Gallagher onto a stretcher, the gang leader looked back at Garrett one final time. "This isn't over," he whispered. Then he called Mitch. "It's time. Have the task force in position, but not visible. When Gallagher and I meet, he's going to make one final mistake." "What if this is a trap?" "It is a trap," Garrett confirmed, "but not the kind he thinks." At 11:45 p.m., the gates of Gallagher's compound swung open. Garrett drove slowly up the circular driveway, noting the positions of armed guards and security cameras. The mansion itself was a monument to criminal success, Spanish colonial architecture, manicured landscaping, and the kind of ostentatious wealth that screamed for federal attention. Gallagher waited on the front steps, flanked by Ray Riddle and 2 other men. As Garrett emerged from the Honda, he noted that all 4 were armed and tense. "Mr. Burns," Gallagher called out, "I have to admit, you've impressed me. Most people don't have the skill or the patience to wage this kind of campaign." Garrett approached with his hands visible but relaxed. "Most people don't have a son in the hospital." "Yes, about that. I've been thinking about our situation, and I believe I have a solution that benefits everyone." They stood 15 feet apart now, close enough to talk without shouting, but far enough to react if violence erupted. "I'm listening." Gallagher smiled, but didn't reach his eyes. "You've cost me my organization, my money, my future. But you've also shown me something important, that I underestimated you from the beginning. Is there a point to this? The point is that I'm done playing games. Gallagher's voice hardened. You want me to pay for what happened to your son? Fine, but I'm taking you with me. Ray Riddle stepped forward, pulling out a pistol. Sorry, Burns. Nothing personal. No, Garrett said calmly. It's very personal. At that moment, several things happened simultaneously. Bright spotlights erupted from multiple positions around the compound's perimeter. Federal agents emerged from concealment positions Garrett had helped them establish earlier that evening. And most importantly, a voice boomed across the compound through megaphones. This is the FBI. You are surrounded. Drop your weapons and get on the ground. Gallagher spun around in shock and fury. You son of a bitch. This was all a setup. No, Garrett corrected, pulling out his own weapon. A service pistol he'd legally purchased that afternoon. This was justice. Ray Riddle swung his gun toward Garrett, but years of combat training proved decisive. Garrett's first shot took Riddle's center mass, dropping him instantly. His second shot shattered Gallagher's right shoulder, spinning the gang leader around and sending his weapon flying. The compound erupted in chaos as federal agents swarmed the property. The remaining guards, faced with overwhelming force and nowhere to run, threw down their weapons and surrendered. Gallagher lay on the ground, clutching his wounded shoulder and staring up at Garrett with a mixture of pain and disbelief. Ow, he gasped. Garrett knelt beside him, ensuring the wound wasn't life-threatening before federal medics arrived. You made the same mistake every criminal makes, Antonio. You thought this was about revenge. Wasn't it? No, it was about justice. Everything I've done over the past week was legal, documented, and designed to give federal authorities exactly what they needed to shut you down permanently. Gallagher's eyes widened as understanding dawned. The raids, the arrests, the evidence, you orchestrated all of it. I provided information to appropriate authorities through proper channels. I documented criminal activities and reported them to law enforcement. And when you threatened my family tonight, I defended myself within the bounds of the law. Federal agents surrounded them now, medics tending to Gallagher's wound while others secured the scene. Agent Lewis Pugh, the task force commander, approached Garrett. Mr. Burns, we'll need a full statement about tonight's events. Of course. I assume you found everything you needed in the compound. Pugh smiled grimly. Oh yes, financial records, weapons cache, drug processing equipment, and enough evidence to put Gallagher away for 3 consecutive life sentences. Plus about a dozen other arrests we'll be making over the next few hours. As paramedics loaded Gallagher onto a stretcher, the gang leader looked back at Garrett one final time. This isn't over, he whispered. Garrett leaned down, so only Gallagher could hear his response. Yes, it is. And in case you're thinking about future revenge, remember that I've just demonstrated exactly what happens to people who threaten my family. There's nowhere you can hide that I can't find you. As the ambulance drove away, Garrett stood in the compound's driveway, watching federal agents catalog evidence and arrest the last remnants of the Serpent Syndicate. Phase 3 was complete. The war was over. Justice had been served. Now it was time to go home to his family. Chapter 8. Unfinished Business. 2 weeks later, Garrett sat beside Devin's hospital bed, watching his son work through physical therapy exercises with grim determination. The swelling had gone down considerably, revealing features that were unmistakably Burns' family genetics: stubborn jaw, intelligent eyes, and the kind of quiet strength that didn't need to announce itself. The doctors say I can go home next week, Devin said, carefully rotating his shoulder. Full recovery expected within 3 months. That's good news. Garrett helped his son with a particularly difficult stretch. How are you feeling about everything that's happened? Devin paused, considering the question. Honestly, part of me is terrified that Gallagher will somehow get out and come after us again. But another part of me, he looked directly at his father. I'm proud that you didn't let him get away with it. Violence should always be a last resort, son. But when the system fails to protect innocent people, sometimes good men have to take extraordinary measures. Is that what you did overseas? Took extraordinary measures. Garrett smiled at his son's perceptive question. I helped people who couldn't help themselves. Whether that was training Syrian rebels to fight ISIS or making sure a gang leader couldn't hurt any more families in Phoenix. A knock at the door interrupted their conversation. Mitch McClure entered, followed by a woman Garrett didn't recognize, mid-40s professional appearance, carrying herself with the confidence of someone in authority. "Garrett, this is Agent Claire McCoy from the FBI's Organized Crime Task Force. She wanted to meet you." Agent McCoy shook Garrett's hand with a firm grip. "Mr. Burns, I wanted to thank you personally for your assistance in the Gallagher case. Your information proved invaluable in dismantling the Serpent Syndicate. I was just being a concerned citizen." McCoy smiled. A very well-informed, concerned citizen with an unusual talent for strategic thinking. "In my 15 years with the Bureau, I've rarely seen such a comprehensive takedown of a criminal organization." "Is Gallagher talking?" "Oh yes. Facing 3 life sentences tends to make people very cooperative. He's provided information that's led to arrests in 4 other states. The entire southwestern drug distribution network is crumbling." Devin looked between the adults. "So it's really over?" "It's over," McCoy confirmed. "Gallagher will never see the outside of a federal prison. Most of his organization is either dead, arrested, or cooperating with authorities. The Serpent Syndicate is finished." After McCoy and Mitch left, Garrett was preparing to leave when his phone rang. Unknown number, but he recognized the voice immediately. "You think you've won." Antonio Gallagher's voice was weak, but filled with venom. "But I've got friends you haven't thought of. People who owe me favors." "How did you get this number, Antonio?" "I've got cousins in Los Angeles." The Serpent Syndicate was just one branch of a much larger tree. "You killed my operation, but you've made enemies of people who make me look like a Sunday school teacher." Garrett felt a familiar cold anger building in his chest. "Are you threatening my family again?" "I'm promising you that this isn't over. My cousin Harvey Wilson runs operations from San Diego to Vegas. He's already put a price on your head." The line went dead. Garrett stared at his phone, processing this new information. He'd been so focused on Gallagher's local operation that he hadn't considered broader family connections. His phone buzzed with a text from Mitch. "Can you meet me at the safe house? Something's come up." The safe house felt different now that the immediate crisis had passed, but Mitch's expression suggested new troubles were brewing. "I've been monitoring federal communications," Mitch said without preamble. "There's been chatter about revenge hits being contracted by someone in the Wilson crime family in California." "Harvey Wilson? You know the name?" "Gallagher just called me from federal custody. Apparently, he has cousins who aren't happy about recent events." Mitch pulled out a thick file. "The Wilson organization makes Gallagher look like small time. They're connected to Mexican cartels, have operations in 6 states, and a reputation for brutality that's legendary even among criminals." Garrett reviewed the intelligence reports, noting the organizational structure and operational methods. The Wilsons were more sophisticated than Gallagher. Better funding, better connections, and most importantly, they operated across state lines, which complicated law enforcement efforts. "What's their timeline?" "Unknown, but sources suggest they're already moving assets into Arizona. Could be contractors, could be family soldiers. Either way, they're coming." Garrett's phone rang again. This time it was Susan. "Garrett, there are men watching the house. They arrived about an hour ago, 2 cars for men total. They're trying to be subtle, but..." "Get out of there right now," Garrett said, standing and reaching for his keys. "Take only essentials and go to your sister's house in Tucson. Do not go anywhere alone." "What's happening?" "Gallagher's family is larger than we thought. I'll handle this, but I need you safe first." After Susan hung up, Garrett turned to Mitch. "How much do you know about the Wilson organization's operations in California?" "Enough to know that taking them on would be like declaring war on a small army." "Garrett, these aren't street-level gang members. They're professional criminals with military-grade equipment and training." Garrett smiled, and Mitch recognized the expression from their days in Afghanistan. The look of a predator who'd found worthy prey. "Good," Garrett said. "I was getting bored. This isn't a joke. They'll have resources you can't match, connections you can't overcome, and experience with this kind of warfare." "Mitch, do you remember what I told you about asymmetric warfare? A smaller, smarter force can always defeat a larger, more conventional enemy if they understand the principles involved. But the Wilsons think they're dealing with someone who got lucky against a local gang leader. They have no idea what they're actually facing. Garrett began making notes on a fresh whiteboard. How long would it take you to get me intelligence on their California operations? Mitch stared at his former instructor, recognizing the futility of trying to talk him out of whatever plan was forming. 48 hours for a basic assessment. A week for detailed operational intelligence. We don't have a week. Give me what you can in 48 hours. Garrett turned to face his former student. And Mitch, this time, we're not just playing defense. Outside, storm clouds gathered over the Phoenix Mountains as Garrett Burns prepared for a war that would take him far from home and deep into enemy territory. The Wilsons wanted to play. He'd teach them the rules. Chapter 9. Blood and Redemption. The warehouse district of San Pedro, California, looked like a graveyard at 3 a.m. Garrett crouched on a rooftop overlooking the Wilson organization's primary distribution center, watching armed guards patrol the perimeter with the casual confidence of men who'd never faced serious opposition. 3 days of surveillance had revealed everything he needed to know about Harvey Wilson's operation. Unlike his cousin Antonio, Harvey was careful, methodical, and surrounded himself with competent soldiers. But like all criminals, he had weaknesses, and Garrett had spent 72 hours identifying every single one. His earpiece crackled with Mitch's voice from the command vehicle parked 6 blocks away. Perimeter guards are changing shift in 2 minutes. You sure about this? I'm sure, Garrett whispered, checking his equipment one final time. Remember, no matter what happens tonight, the recording devices stay active. This all has to be documented. Copy that. Federal task force is standing by, but they can't move until we have evidence of active crimes in progress. Garrett smiled in the darkness. After dismantling Gallagher's organization within the bounds of the law, he'd decided to take a more direct approach with the Wilsons. Sometimes the only way to stop monsters was to become something they feared more than death. The guard change proceeded like clockwork. As the new shift settled into their positions, Garrett dropped silently into the warehouse compound, his movements invisible against the industrial shadows. Inside the main building, Harvey Wilson reviewed distribution schedules with his lieutenant, Salvatore Dalton. The warehouse hummed with activity, workers packaging drugs for shipment, accountants tallying profits, and armed guards maintaining security. Any word from Phoenix? Wilson asked. The contractor we sent got spooked and left town. Says Garrett Burns isn't just some grieving father. Guy's got serious military training and connections. Wilson, a lean man in his 50s with the kind of face that suggested he'd done violence personally, waved dismissively. I don't care if he's Rambo. Nobody destroys a Wilson operation and walks away. What if he comes here? Let him come. This isn't Phoenix, and I'm not my stupid cousin Antonio. Burns might have gotten lucky once, but the lights went out. Emergency lighting kicked in a moment later, bathing the warehouse in red shadows. Armed guards immediately moved to defensive positions while Wilson grabbed a radio. Report. What's the situation? Static answered him. Dalton, take a team and check the power grid. Everyone else, lock down positions. We've got an intruder. But as the guards spread out through the warehouse, they found something unexpected. C4 explosive charges attached to every structural support beam, each one connected to a wireless detonator. And standing in the center of the warehouse floor, clearly visible under the emergency lighting, was Garrett Burns. Harvey Wilson, his voice echoed through the building. I understand you put a price on my head. Wilson emerged from his office, flanked by 6 armed men. You're either very brave or very stupid, Burns. Actually, I'm very prepared. Garrett held up a detonator. These charges are rigged to blow if I release this dead man's switch. But more importantly, everything that's happened in the last 5 minutes has been transmitted to federal authorities. You're bluffing. Am I? Garrett gestured around the warehouse. Look around, Harvey. See all those workers packaging heroin? Those accountants counting drug money? The weapons cache visible from your office. For the first time, Wilson looked uncertain. What do you want? I want you to understand something that your cousin never grasped. This isn't about money or territory or respect. This is about consequences. Consequences for what? For thinking you could threaten my family and hide behind geographical distance and superior numbers. Garrett's voice remained calm, but his eyes burned with cold fire. For believing that corruption and fear make you untouchable. One of Wilson's guards, a nervous-looking man named Kent Miles, shifted his weight. "Boss, maybe we should—" "Shut up," Wilson snapped, then focused back on Garrett. "You've got balls, I'll give you that. But you're outnumbered 20-1. 20-1, Garrett agreed. In a building rigged with enough explosives to level a city block. Those aren't great odds for anyone. Wilson's radio crackled to life. "Boss, we've got federal agents surrounding the building. FBI, ATF, looks like the whole alphabet is out there." Garrett smiled. "Harvey, meet Agent Clara McCoy and the Joint Federal Task Force. They've been very interested in your operation since I provided them with detailed intelligence about your activities. This is a setup. No, this is justice. Just like with your cousin." For 30 seconds, the warehouse was silent except for the hum of machinery and the distant sound of sirens. Then Wilson made his final mistake. "Kill him." The gunfight lasted exactly 47 seconds. Garrett had spent 3 days studying the warehouse layout, positioning equipment, and planning contingencies. When violence erupted, he moved with the precision of a man who'd fought in some of the world's most dangerous places. The first guard to fire missed in the red-tinted darkness. Garrett's return shot didn't. As chaos erupted around them, federal agents breached the building from multiple entry points. The Wilson organization, caught between federal firepower and an enemy who knew the building better than they did, collapsed with stunning speed. When the smoke cleared, Harvey Wilson lay wounded but alive, surrounded by federal agents and facing charges that would put him away forever. His organization, built over 15 years of careful criminal enterprise, had been dismantled in less than an hour. Garrett stood amid the wreckage, his detonator now safely deactivated, watching federal agents catalog evidence that would close down drug operations across 6 states. Agent McCoy approached him. "Mr. Burns, once again, your intelligence proved invaluable in stopping a major criminal organization. I'm just a concerned citizen who believes in justice." She studied his face in the emergency lighting. "You know, in all my years with the Bureau, I've never seen anyone with your particular talent for strategic thinking. If you ever consider a career change, thank you, but I think I'm done with this kind of work." As federal agents led Harvey Wilson away in handcuffs, the gang leader looked back at Garrett one final time. "This won't bring your son back to normal," he said. Garrett met his gaze steadily. "No, but it'll help him sleep better knowing that the people who threatened his family are in federal prison where they belong." 1 month later, Garrett sat on the back patio of his Phoenix home, watching Devin practice physical therapy exercises in the swimming pool. His son's recovery had exceeded all medical expectations, physically and psychologically. Susan joined him, carrying 2 cups of coffee and the morning newspaper. The front page featured an article about the conviction of Antonio Gallagher and his organization, along with a smaller story about federal raids that had disrupted drug operations across the Southwest. "Any regrets?" she asked. Garrett considered the question as he watched his son complete another exercise routine. "About protecting my family? Never. About the methods you used? Everything I did was within the bounds of the law. I gathered intelligence, reported crimes to appropriate authorities, and defended myself when threatened. The fact that I was more thorough than most people doesn't change that." Devin climbed out of the pool and joined them on the patio, moving with only a slight limp that would disappear within weeks. "Dad, I've been thinking about what you said, about good men taking extraordinary measures when the system fails. And I want to study criminal justice. Maybe join the FBI someday. Help make sure the system works better for other families." Garrett smiled at his son, the same proud expression he'd worn when Devin took his first steps, graduated high school, and overcome every challenge life had thrown at him. "That sounds like an excellent plan." As they sat together in the Arizona sunshine, Garrett's phone remained silent. No more threats, no more late-night calls from desperate criminals seeking revenge. The Serpent Syndicate was finished. The Wilson organization was dismantled. Justice had been served. But more importantly, his family was safe. And sometimes that was worth any price. This is where our story comes to an end. Share your thoughts in the comments section. Thanks for your precious time. If you enjoyed this story, then please make sure you subscribe to this channel. That would help me a lot. Click on the video you see on the screen, and I will see you there.